Chapter 4. The Puppet Master. The trial of Desiree Murray was the talk of the town, a spectacle fueled by the unfolding drama of Paul Murray's secret life and the public's fascination with fallen idols. Horace Sterling, despite the damning new evidence of Paul's affair and impending departure, fought fiercely, attempting to discredit the circumstantial nature of the evidence and cast doubt on Desiree's motive. He argued that Desiree, a shrewd businesswoman, would not have allowed herself to be implicated so carelessly. Gerald, however, was still wrestling with his nagging intuition. The more he delved into Paul Murray's life, the more a disturbing portrait emerged. A man who delighted in orchestrating events, pulling strings from behind the scenes, and maintaining an illusion of control. The sedative in Paul's system, the strategically placed letter opener, the timing of Desiree's swim, all felt too coincidental, too deliberately crafted. What if Paul Murray wasn't just a victim, Andy? Gerald pondered, pacing his office. What if he was a puppet master even in his own death? King looked up from her notes, intrigued. A puppet master of his own murder, Inspector? That's a bold theory. Think about it. He was planning to leave Desiree, yes, but he was also planning to cut her out of a substantial portion of his wealth. If she simply divorced him, she'd still get a chunk of his legitimate estate. But if she was accused of his murder, she'd lose everything. Her reputation, her wealth, her freedom. This shifted the perspective entirely. Could Paul Murray, in a final act of vengeful manipulation, have orchestrated his own death in a way that would frame Desiree? It was a dark, disturbing thought, but it fit with the character that was slowly being revealed. They returned to the crime scene, this time with a new lens. They re-interviewed Winnie, the housekeeper, asking about Paul's habits, his routines, and any unusual occurrences leading up to his death. Winnie, did Mr. Murray ever do anything that struck you as odd or out of character? Gerald asked. Winnie thought for a long moment, then her eyes widened slightly. Well, sir, a few weeks before, him start asking me if I do a lot of small things for him, like him always ask me if I wipe down his desk, real careful, especially the letter openers. Him say dem delicate, and him don't want nobody's fingerprint on dem. A cold chill ran down Gerald's spine. He specifically asked you to wipe the letter openers, Winnie. Yes, sir. Often. Him say him a collector and him want them pristine. This was a significant revelation. If Paul had been meticulously wiping his letter openers clean, it would explain why his fingerprints were not found on the murder weapon. He was removing any evidence of his own contact. Next, they focused on the sedative. Gerald consulted with Dr. Chambers, the forensic pathologist. Dr. Chambers, what kind of sedative was found in Mr. Murray's system? It was a benzodiazepine, Inspector. A common tranquilizer. Not something you'd find over the counter. Requires a prescription. Did Mr. Murray have any prescriptions for such a drug? Dr. Chambers checked her records. No, not that I can see. However, Mrs. Murray did. She had a prescription for a similar benzodiazepine, prescribed for anxiety a few months ago after a particularly stressful business deal. The pieces were falling into place with a terrifying precision. Desiree had a prescription for the exact type of sedative found in Paul's system. If he had access to her medication, he could have easily acquired it. Gerald and King meticulously reconstructed the night of the murder, now with the chilling possibility of Paul's manipulation in mind. Sedative. Paul, knowing Desiree had the sedative, could have subtly obtained it. Perhaps he pretended to have trouble sleeping and asked her for one of her pills, or even took one from her stash without her knowledge. He then administered it to himself, likely in his evening drink, ensuring he would be in a deep, defenseless sleep. Point 2. The planting. Before the drug took full effect, Paul could have taken the letter opener from his desk, one he had instructed Winnie to keep wiped clean, and placed it near the bed. The trap. He knew Desiree's morning routine like clockwork. The swim, the hour of solitude. He knew that when she returned, she would be the first to find him. But there was still one glaring problem with this theory. Dead men don't stab themselves in the heart and then hide the weapon under the bed. It still doesn't add up, Inspector, King argued. Even if he drubbed himself and wiped the prints, someone still had to drive the blade home. A man doesn't commit suicide by stabbing himself perfectly through the heart and then tucking himself back in under the duvet. You are right, Gerald murmured. He didn't kill himself. He poked the hornet's nest until the hornet had no choice but to sting. They went back to the financial records, specifically looking at the weeks leading up to the death. They found a series of emails between Paul and a private investigator he had hired to tail himself. It was a bizarre discovery, but the investigator's report showed that Paul was intentionally making himself appear vulnerable, flaunting his affair in places where he knew Desiree's associates would see him. He was gaslighting her, taunting her in the shadows of their own home, pushing her to the edge of a psychological cliff. The tension in the Murray household must have been a living, breathing thing. Chapter 5: The Final Plea. The courtroom was packed for the final day of testimony. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the static of anticipation. Desiree Murray stood in the dock, looking smaller than she ever had. The weight of the world, and the weight of her husband's ghost, seemed to have finally bowed her shoulders. Gerald sat in the back, watching. He knew the truth now, or at least the version of it that existed in the gray area between murder and survival. The prosecution had just finished a scathing summary of the evidence: the fingerprints, the sedative, the motive of a woman scorned. Horace Sterling stood up, ready to give his closing statement, but Desiree touched his arm. She whispered something to him, her face pale but resolute. Sterling looked shocked, then nodded slowly. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, my client wishes to change her plea. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The judge leaned forward. On what charge, Mr. Sterling? My client wishes to plead guilty to the charge of manslaughter. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly to restore order. When silence finally fell, the prosecutor, looking bewildered but sensing an easy win, agreed to the lesser charge. Desiree was called to the stand to provide her allocution, the formal statement of her guilt. I didn't plan to kill him, she began, her voice cracking before settling into a low, haunting, steady rhythm. But Paul, he was a man who knew how to destroy you from the inside out. He told me that night. He sat on the edge of the bed and told me about Laura. He told me he had moved the money. He laughed, Inspector. She looked toward Gerald in the back of the room. He told me I was nothing without his name. He showed me the letter opener and told me he'd already made sure my prints were all over it. He said, if you leave me, I'll tell the world you tried to kill me. If you stay, I'll make sure you watch me give everything we built to another woman. She took a shaky breath. The argument was, it was pure hell. Me never see him so wicked. He had taken the sedative. He was drowsy, but he was still spitting venom. He pushed me. He called me a duty gal from the country who got lucky. I saw the blade. I didn't think. I just wanted the words to stop. I wanted the mockery to end. She described the moment of the strike, a frantic, panicked thrust born of months of psychological torture. She hadn't realized the sedative was already making him too weak to fight back. When he slumped over, she panicked. She had tucked him in, hidden the weapon, and gone for her swim, trying to wash the reality off her skin in the cold blue water. She had hoped, in some delirious part of her mind, that if she followed her routine, the nightmare wouldn't be real when she returned. The matching evidence was undeniable. The sedatives from her cabinet, her fingerprints on the wood, the lack of his prints because of his own obsessive cleaning instructions to Winnie. As she was led away in handcuffs, not to a life sentence for murder, but to a significant term for manslaughter, she passed Gerald. He won, didn't he? she whispered. Gerald looked at her, seeing the wreckage of 2 lives built on a foundation of emerald silk and lies. He's dead, Mrs. Murray. Nobody won. The Murray villa was eventually sold. The lush gardens grew wild, and the local children told stories of the emerald ghost that haunted the master bedroom. In the end, the affluent lifestyle hadn't been a shield or a cage. It had been the shroud itself, beautiful to look at, but cold and suffocating to everyone caught beneath it.